My name is Lisa. It's been just about a year since I married my husband, Robert. We've been living happily together in a small, cheap apartment, dreaming of moving into a newly built, detached house. His parents' house is located within a 5-minute walk, but they seldom come to our place. He once said, "My mom doesn't want to be the type to meddle with her son's marriage. That's why she doesn't visit us, even though we live so close." Upon hearing this, I started liking my mother-in-law even more. The biggest concern for most women after getting married is the meddling mother-in-law, but it seems I don't have to worry about that. If I were to be meddled with, I am sure I would resist. I've always been told by my parents, "If somebody picks on you, give it back twice as hard. Then nobody will mess with you." But it seemed unlikely I'd have to fight with my mother-in-law, so I was able to live stress-free regarding my family relationships. After several years of working, our careers were going well, and we started to have many conversations about buying a house. During this time, my parents, who had heard about our discussions, made us an attractive proposal. "We've always thought if you two decided to build a house, we'd give you some of our land. Feel free to use it." They offered to give us part of their own land. My parents aren't rich though. Thanks to a windfall my grandfather got a while ago, they have had some very good land to pass on to us. When they discussed it with my grandfather, he said, "I've passed it on to you, so do as you please." When I told Robert about this, he said, "Let's take advantage of their generosity. I'll never be able to thank your parents enough. And thank your grandpa too. It's his land after all. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha." So, we began to discuss what kind of house we wanted to live in, visiting showrooms on the weekends, touring our boss's impressive mansion, and talking to agents about new residences being built. Planning is often more fun than actually executing, isn't it? But then, one day, a call from my mother-in-law shattered our happy life suddenly. When Robert answered a call from his mother, it seemed she had somehow heard about our plans to build a new house. She said to Robert, "If you're going to build a house, how about making it a duplex so we can live together?" We were both stunned by her proposal. We hadn't imagined that my mother-in-law, who had seldom interfered in our lives, would want to live with us in a duplex. After a few seconds of silence, Robert made a non-committal response and continued to dodge this question. It's not surprising that he reacted this way. We hadn't considered the option of a duplex. We were planning to have a room for a future child, but if we were to make it a duplex, we'd have to replan everything from scratch. But I worried that if we outright rejected the idea, our relationship with my mother-in-law would suffer. I was as perplexed as Robert. We had made a promise to have dinner at her place once a month, so we had a family dinner there. My mother-in-law began to continue her conversation from where we cut off last time, even though there was Robert's brother, Mark, a single father. "Hey, have you given any thought to our conversation from the other day about the duplex? I think it's a really good idea though. What do you think? Of course we will contribute financially, and selling our place here should net a pretty penny. Besides, kids are going to come along eventually, right? Wouldn't it be helpful if we're right next door whenever there's trouble? Isn't it all upsides?" And with that, she started rapid-fire listing off the merits of a duplex. I tried to interject several times, but she didn't let me. Sure, she had a point. It would be nice to have help when a baby comes along, and the financial contribution is appealing. But I believed that my husband and I could handle any issues that were within her capacity to solve. Besides, it's better to rely on my own parents than to increase the chances of being bullied by her. Seeing my contemplative face, she continued, "Is it really that bad? Living with us, I mean. I thought you didn't hate us, but maybe I was wrong." She seemed to be playing the part of the saddened, so I pretended not to hear and hurriedly left her house. She continued to bombard my husband daily with the same spiel, and I was starting to feel quite stressed. "What do you want to do, Robert?" "Living together isn't bad, I guess. It would be reassuring to have our parents around, but I don't want to lose our alone time either." After much thought, we decided to decline my mother-in-law's offer. We wanted to give a priority to our own time. We decided to prioritize that. Surely if we explain properly, my mother-in-law will understand. So the day of our monthly family dinner arrived, and we were heading over to my mother-in-law's house to relay our decision. As we tried to express our thoughts to her, she interrupted. "Oh, about the duplex. We've been moving forward with the plan." "Huh? What?" Before we could react further, she added, "Oh, and Mark's moving in too. You know he's a single dad. It's tough, right? Let's help him out with the kid. Plus, getting some experience with kids will be reassuring when you have your own, don't you think? You should definitely do that." We were so shocked by her words that we completely forgot why we had come. Seeing our silence, my mother-in-law took it as approval and proceeded with the construction of the duplex, taking into account the views of my father-in-law and brother-in-law. Of course, we didn't just stand by. We tried to convey our decision to our in-laws several times, but they always dismissed us, saying, "We're busy right now, let's talk later." And the plans for the duplex moved forward. The cost for the construction was being covered by our in-laws, so we didn't have a huge financial burden. But not only would we be living with our in-laws, but also my single father brother-in-law, and we would have to help take care of his child. Thinking about it, I was already feeling down. My husband was of no help, having thrown in the towel, saying, "There's nothing we can do to stop it now. Let's just give up." I also felt it was futile to resist alone. We then finalized the blueprint and started deciding on interior elements like the tiles and flooring. Normally at this stage, we should have secured the funds. However, the money my in-laws had promised to pay for the multi-family house was nowhere to be seen. My husband Robert called his mother asking her to transfer the funds, but she responded, "Something came up and I need money immediately. Could you cover it for me? I promise to pay you back in a month, okay?" Even though they can't pay now, the project has already proceeded, and it's impossible to cancel everything at this point. Robert and I could barely manage to cover it ourselves, but we didn't feel the need to go to such lengths. My in-laws' selfish behavior infuriated both of us. "Hey, you talk about covering the cost like it's a small change," Robert yelled at his mother. "Come on, she said she'd pay it back in a month. Has she ever lied to you?" Suddenly, my brother-in-law butted in. Stunned by his intervention, Robert agreed to wait for a month for the payment and started waiting for his mother's transfer. I decided to consult with my parents about this. The next day, I went to my parents' house and explained the situation, wondering if we could put the plans on hold. They said, "We were going to give you that land anyway, and if they're promising to pay later, we'll cover the cost." "Really? Are you sure?" "Of course, dear. Your happiness is all that matters to us. Don't give up on your dream house. For the sake of your future children, don't let this multifamily plan go through. Thank you." I was so grateful that I teared up. My mom smirked and said, "Plus, if they're around all the time, it'll be hard for me to visit, right? And I want to hog all the grandkids to myself." With my mother's help, the construction proceeded as planned, and finally, our dream home was completed. However, a month later, we still hadn't received any money from my mother-in-law. Meanwhile, they had started moving their belongings in before us. "Strange, isn't it a bit cramped for a duplex? Where's my room?" Since they didn't transfer the money for a duplex, we didn't build one. Naturally, there was no room for her. But she started moving her stuff into the room we'd planned for our future children. To make matters worse, she invited her friends over under the guise of a housewarming party and showed them around the house. "It's our dream duplex. It's a bit small, but we have a wonderful garden and can even plant a vegetable garden. Once the veggies are ready, I'll share some with you," she said, as if they had built the house with their own money. Her friends, unaware of the circumstances, complimented the house before leaving. After they moved in and things settled down, 2 months passed and we still hadn't received any payment from my in-laws. Robert confronted them, but they kept saying, "Soon, very soon." The situation didn't change even after 3 months or even half a year. On the contrary, my mother-in-law announced one day, "We decided not to sell our house. Instead, we'll have Mark and his kids live there," blatantly stating that she wouldn't pay us any money. But I wasn't surprised. My husband and I had often discussed that she likely had no intention of paying. "Oh, I just noticed that the house is a bit cramped when you two live there too. Can you guys move out? I have friends who occasionally want to stay over, and I want to be able to use the place freely. Doesn't that sound good?" she asked. In response, my husband raised his voice slightly and said, "That's not the deal. Why should we have to leave our own house?" "Well, both of you are working, right? You're hardly ever at home, and since you don't have any kids, it shouldn't be a problem. Besides, Lisa's family is rich, right? You can afford to build a new house." I was dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's outrageous words. My husband felt the same way. "First off, you haven't paid any of the expenses like you said you would. If you're not selling the house, you had no intention of paying from the beginning, right?" "What can I do? I decided to let Mark, who's a single father, live there. What's wrong with giving a house to my own son and his adorable children?" She started to get increasingly irritated, and it seemed unlikely that things would clear up. So we decided to discuss it in our bedroom that night. "If things continue like this, my mother and her family will definitely try to kick us out and take over the house." Yeah, I suppose so. My husband was right. From the next day onwards, my mother-in-law's attacks continued daily, and she started making nasty comments and harassing me. "If you don't want to be bullied as a daughter-in-law, you better move out quickly." This is what they call mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law problems. I thought I wouldn't have to deal with such issues, but experiencing them firsthand turned out to be more troublesome than I'd imagined. When we were living in that small room, we barely interacted with her. Maybe I was foolish to not anticipate that things would turn out this way. However, being a person who believes in giving back as good as she gets, I decided to put a plan into action a month later. My husband, parents, grandfather, and I put a plan together. We decided to leave the house to execute our plan. My husband told my mother-in-law, "We're moving out. You want to invite your friends over as you please, right? You'll be happier that way." The moment she heard that, her face lit up with joy. We decided to move to a newly built apartment that we'd had our eyes on and return to renting. Reminds me of our newlywed days.
Yeah, it does.
Recalling our life in that apartment when we were newly married, we lived peacefully. Then, a week later, the phone rang. I overheard my husband say,
"I see, that's great. By when?"
I was sure that our plan had worked. In fact, the day after we made the plan with my parents and grandfather, we put our house up for sale. We found a buyer who wanted us to vacate in 3 weeks. While my mother-in-law wasn't around, we let acquaintances, colleagues, and others who wanted to see the house inside. Today's phone call was about one family who decided to buy. Then we arranged for 2 large trucks and decided to have the movers quickly load our belongings and furnitures onto them. We carefully timed it for when my in-laws announced that they were going to a theme park in New York over the weekend with their grandsons. They are probably enjoying their time with a certain mouse mascot right about now. Since they said they would be staying overnight, we thought that was our chance and prepared in advance. Everything went smoothly as planned because the professional movers did the packing for us, and it was completed much faster than we anticipated. We waited in front of the house, and when my in-laws returned in the evening, they seemed tense that something was different. My mother-in-law, looking anxious, entered the house and screamed, "What is this? What happened? Where are all our things?" My father-in-law was also making a fuss. Robert and I calmly observed my in-laws from the outside, and when they came out, we revealed the truth. Robert said, "Everything is loaded on these trucks. The destination is noted on a piece of paper stuck onto the trucks, so please go there. It might be a bit small, but it's enough for the 2 of you to live in. Well, it might get a bit cramped if you invite friends over. Also, this house has already been sold. It's someone else's property now. Take care." My in-laws were flabbergasted. "What do you mean you put it up for sale? It was our house. You can't just..."
"Our house? The property was in Lisa's parents' name, and the house is in our name. We are the owners, so we have the right to sell it. And you dare say it's your house when you haven't paid $1. You should be ashamed.
At the unexpected words from their son, my in-laws, who were causing a big fuss, fell silent. Before we left, Robert said,
"We've taken care of things until now, but you'll have to unload things yourselves. You can afford that much, can't you?"
"We don't have that kind of money."
"I know you must have. You've been selling things you stole from Lisa and depositing the money in your bank account."
"How did you know that?"
"Does it matter?"
"Oh, and you don't have to pay us back. Consider it severance pay. Use it however you like."
And with that, we'll be off. I doubt we'll meet again.
With that, Robert made a declaration of severance to his parents, took my hand, and we hurried home. We then called our parents and grandparents to inform them of the successful execution of our plan, and they were very happy. Moreover, my grandfather, knowing that we were about to continue living in an apartment, said,
"Actually, I still have some land left. I'll give it to you two. I'll also cover half the costs, so build a new house."
And that's exactly what we did. Half a year later, we completed our dream of building a brand new single-family home. We're a bit removed from the city center, but the air is fresh, the neighbors are kind, and we're very happy. As for the whereabouts of my in-laws, we don't know if they went to the address we provided. It seems they contacted my parents asking for financial aid. They also apparently asked their son, who is planning to remarry next year, if they could live with him, but he flatly refused because his new wife was also planning to move in. My parents decisively turned them down. They told them not to involve our family anymore. Robert apologized to my parents for his terrible ones, but my parents said, "From now on, we're your real parents. Feel free to rely on us as much as you want as a son." Thinking about potential future incidents, my parents recommended that we install a home security system. We can rest easy knowing they've been briefed to turn away his parents if they ever show up. Moreover, we have a guard dog that is a small, cute puppy in our yard. I highly doubt they'd have the guts to intrude. From now on, we won't have to deal with his parents at all. It's the beginning of a new life for the two of us. We'll surely have children in a few years and build a happy family. We won't let anyone disturb our happiness. That's a promise we've made to ourselves.
Get over here now and pick up the old hag we kicked out of our house because we want nothing to do with her.
About a month after my father's funeral, I received an unexpected call from Jackson. He had kicked my mother out of the house and demanded that I take care of her from now on. I was taken aback, unable to comprehend the situation immediately. "You're joking, right? You didn't actually kick Mom out of the house."
"Come see for yourself. Oh, and I let her take Dad's memorial tablet."
"Why would you do something so cruel?"
"I have no use for Mom now that we can't get Dad's inheritance. She's just a poor burden, isn't she?"
I was shocked. Apparently, my late father had debts, and after paying them off, there was no inheritance left. This was news to me. Even worse, Jackson and his wife had been living in the family home all this time. It was outrageous.
"It's getting dark soon. If you don't come to pick her up, Mom will be sleeping on the streets."
How could you be so cruel? I will never forgive you for this, Jackson.
"I don't need your forgiveness, ha ha ha."
That's just too harsh. Jackson hung up without hearing me out, and subsequent calls went unanswered. When I managed to reach my mother, she confirmed that everything Jackson had said was true. Angry at Jackson and worried for my mother, I had no choice but to drive over to where she was. I am Lily, a 27-year-old woman in a hurry. 3 years ago, I married Mason, who is the same age as me, and we've been living together since. At the beginning of our marriage, we lived with my parents in the family home, but 2 years ago, Jackson and his wife abruptly moved in. They said our presence was making the place crowded and we were forced to leave. My older brother Jackson, 8 years my senior, has always been selfish, but his marriage seems to have enhanced that trait. Our family home, where I was born and raised, is a spacious mansion, inherited from my grandfather with extensive land. There should be no discomfort in living together. I was not satisfied with the situation and urged with Jackson, but my husband, who hates conflicts, urged us to leave. Around that time, my father was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, which had already significantly worsened. I wanted to spend his last moments with him, but that didn't happen. The disease rapidly consumed my father, and he passed away a month ago. My heart ached knowing that my mother must be in much more pain than I was. To have my own brother treat us this way, amidst all the fresh sorrow, it was pitiful. What would happen next was truly a shock. An hour later, when we arrived at our family home, my mom was sitting desolate on a suitcase in the garden. The front door was locked. Jackson, she said, had taken her keys. Using my set of keys, I unlocked the door and walked in with my mom. Jackson and Olivia were sprawled on the sofa, nonchalantly watching TV. Is this some kind of joke?
Huh? How did you get in?
I used my key to open the front door. Isn't it obvious?
Ugh, slipped my mind. Leave your key, take the old lady, and go.
This isn't funny. How can you be watching TV after kicking your own mother out of the house? Besides, if the house remained, even after Dad's debts were paid off, Mom has a right to live here.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Infuriated by Jackson's dismissive attitude, I stood in front of the TV. Mom has a right to inherit this house. If you can't live with her, you should be the one to leave, Jackson.
Shut up. This house is mine. Dad gave it to me when he was alive. Don't act smart without knowing anything.
What? What do you mean? There's no way Dad gave this house to you, Jackson, before he died. Mom also looked puzzled, shaking her head. In the face of our confusion, Jackson smirked and got up from the sofa, bringing out an envelope from a room in the back.
Look at this.
What's this?
It's proof that I inherited this house.
The envelope contained documents proving the inheritance, prepared by a judicial scrivener, and his real estate ownership certificate. He said that the property had been transferred to his name a month before Dad passed away. Mom and I were shocked as we looked at the documents. Why would Dad do something like this? Asking a departed person doesn't yield an answer. I sighed, looking at his picture. Why would Dad hand over the house to Jackson without discussing it with Mom?
Because I'm his favorite, of course. I told him that Mom would take the house once he passed away, so he gave it to me while he was still alive.
That can't be. I can't believe it.
Open your eyes and face the reality.
No matter how many times we checked the documents, the property was in Jackson's name. All this just for a house? My mom muttered in disbelief. Is there no other inheritance? Nothing left for Mom?
Nothing. Be glad that the debts are cleared.
This can't be real.
You're not just worrying about Mom. You realize there's no inheritance for you either, right?
The bank card he handed over contained only a few dollars. I wasn't after Dad's inheritance, but it was a shock to learn that he had left me nothing. This is too cruel. And to add insult to injury, Olivia was laughing her heart out seeing our dejection.
Now get lost. You poor people have no business here.
Jackson and Olivia forcibly drove us out of the house. Ouch, that hurts. Mom had fallen and scraped her palm when they pushed us out. Blood was seeping from the wound. As I wrapped her hand in my handkerchief, tears of frustration welled up and fell. My mother, seeing me like this, gently wiped my tears, her eyes filled with sorrow as well. Mom, our place is small, but come stay with us. But I don't want to impose on Mason. I'll find somewhere else to stay. Don't worry. I just can't leave you like this. I'm going to call Mason right now. Just wait. Wiping my tears, I grabbed my cell phone and dialed my husband. From the other end of the line, I heard Mason's voice.
Hello?
Mason, I'm sorry for calling out of the blue. My mom has been kicked out of her house. As I explained the situation to my surprised husband, he hummed in understanding, though he seemed a bit hesitant. I held my breath waiting for Mason's response.
Our apartment is pretty cramped compared to Mom's house. It might not be the most comfortable.
Yeah, our place is tiny.
But I don't mind. Bring your mom over. We've had times where we were taken care of at home too. In times of trouble, we should help each other out.
Mason, thank you so much. My husband is a kind man with a big heart. He could never leave someone in need. Quickly, we took Mom to our apartment, and from that day on, we lived together. However, living with 3 people in our small apartment was certainly cramped. We don't have enough savings to buy a house yet, but should we move to a slightly larger place?
That might be good. I feel bad for your mom in this small space.
As my husband and I were searching for properties on the computer, my mom's cell phone rang. After a while, she hung up the phone and said something we never could have imagined. Why don't we live in my Highlands condominium?
Wait, what?
Highlands condominium? Yes. What do you mean? My mother began to explain, to our surprise. Apparently, my grandfather, who was a wealthy man, was quite a spendthrift and spent all the money he made in a day on that day. In order to deal with his constant borrowing, my grandmother had no choice but to sell off their farmland and make ends meet. According to my mom, my father was also a big spender. But we don't have any assets other than the house we lived in, so I was really worried about our future. That's why I invested in real estate with the money I earned when I was working before I got married. My husband and I were absolutely stunned. It turns out, in addition to the Highlands condominium, my mom was also managing an apartment building and had made a significant amount of money from her real estate investments. I can't even comprehend this. It's too amazing. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Anyway, I just got a call from the management company that there's a vacancy in the Highlands condominium. We can move in next month. What do you think? There was no reason to refuse such a generous offer. Plus, it was a Highlands condominium with 3 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen, located just a 5-minute walk from the station, which was much more comfortable than our current situation. Thank you, Mom. But we may only be able to pay as much rent as we are for the apartment. You don't need to worry about that. No way. We have to do this properly, even if we're family. Oh, I need to tell the landlord that we're moving out. Looking at my husband and I beaming with joy, my mother's face brightens too. Time flew by as we busied ourselves preparing to move in. Before we knew it, we had spent 2 months living in our new home, Highlands condominium. As I was about to head out for some shopping, I was taken aback when the Jackson couple suddenly appeared in front of the condominium entrance.
Why are you, a pauper, living in Highlands condominium? Did you hit the jackpot or something?
Of course not. Highlands condominium has always belonged to my mom. Jackson and Olivia were both taken aback.
What?
They exclaim in unison, looking at the towering condominium. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at their confused and goofy expressions. Jackson, his face flushing red, began to seethe with anger.
That wretched woman! I can't believe she was hiding this from us while pretending to be poor.
My mom never said she was poor. You just assumed it, Jackson. Plus, she inherited a large house. What's wrong with that?
That's not the point.
Don't yell here. It's disrespectful to the other residents. Besides, how did you know I was here? Jackson said that when he couldn't reach my mother, he tracked her down using her mobile phone's location. Why are you trying to contact Mom now after kicking her out? I bet it's something nasty again.
Regardless, if Mom is here, I want to see her. Let me in, now.
You must be joking. If you hurt Mom again, I couldn't bear it. If you have something to say, you can tell me. But they kept insisting on seeing my mother, without revealing why. The Jackson couple seemed rather flustered. Weren't you living comfortably in your huge family house, just the two of you?
It's none of your business.
Fine, if you don't want to tell me, that's okay. I have to go now. Bye. As I tried to walk past the Jackson couple, Jackson suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. Ouch, let me go.
Just call Mom.
Absolutely not. I'll call the police. But Jackson just scoffed at me, as if looking down on me.
There's no way the police would come for a simple family argument. Even if they did, there's no way you could sue me for just grabbing your arm.
I suppose you're right. It was true. Calling the police over something so minor might not only be futile, but also disruptive to others. I felt bad and ended up not saying anything. Fine, I'll tell my mom, but only if you tell me why you're here.
The utility bills for that house are ridiculous. Just for the AC, the electric bill is $500. This is no joke.
Their old, traditional-style house had more than 8 rooms, so it was no surprise that utility costs were high. But even so, a $500 electricity bill seemed a little steep. It was a particularly hot summer, so they probably overused the AC. I thought you would have known that from the start.
How would we have known? Mom used to pay the bills.
Jackson scratched his head frantically as Olivia fumed. There's no way we would have known. Do you know the property tax for that house is $5,000 a year?
What?
I can't believe you didn't know.
Why would an old house like that cost so much? How are we supposed to pay that?
Our house is old and has a large yard, so it's only natural that it would cost a lot to maintain. I also pointed out a reality to the Jacksons that they might not have realized. And you know, apparently it costs more in taxes to give away property while you're alive than after you pass away. This is going to be tough going forward.
Wait, is that true?
I see you didn't know. I told them this was all true, information I had heard from my mom, and the color drained from the Jacksons' faces. Seeing the stunned Jacksons, Olivia burst out in anger, saying, "It's your fault for not doing your homework!" And they started fighting right in front of me.
After all the trouble we went through to get Dad to change the name on the house, this is too much.
That's what you get for doing something so underhanded.
But even Dad said clearly that it would be better to give it to me than to your mom.
I can't believe it. I was shocked and fell silent, realizing that my father had disregarded my mom and me. Then, seizing the moment, Jackson made an outrageous request.
You can have the house. Let's exchange it for this Highlands condominium.
What are you talking about? This isn't mine, it belongs to Mom.
Please, talk to Mom for me. I beg you.
I promise to pass on your message, nothing more.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Feeling ridiculous for even engaging with them, I gave up on shopping and started to head back into the Highlands condominium through the entrance, but the Jacksons tried to follow me in. Their audacity left me speechless. I'll sue you for trespassing.
You just told us that wouldn't be a legal issue.
It seems like they won't get the message until they suffer a real consequence. Exasperated, I called out to the management office next to the entrance. Excuse me, could you please call the security? Someone who's not a resident of the Highlands condominium is trying to force their way in.
What? Wait a minute.
The security guard, who was on standby 24/7 at the Highlands condominium, came running immediately. With the large security guard in front of them, the two of them were startled, and I warned them once again to avoid the same thing happening in the future. I didn't call the police just now because you only grabbed my arm, but if you try to use force or enter the Highlands condominium again, I will really call the police, okay?
We beg you, don't do that.
If I even catch a glimpse of you, I'll report it. So go back to your mansion that you got from Dad. Got it? Apparently scared of the police, the Jacksons hastily retreated. I went back to my apartment and told my mother about the exchange with the Jacksons. But why did Dad let Jackson inherit the house? As I was feeling downcast, my mom smiled. Dad must have known what he was doing when he let Jackson inherit. He didn't want to burden me or you, Lily. Even though Dad was indifferent about money, he cared for me a lot. Of course, he always said he loved you, Lily, so much. Really? I was overjoyed to hear that my father felt that way about me. When my mom heard about the inheritance from Jackson, she muttered, "Are you going this far?" Because she realized that he had given a severe punishment to Jackson, who was always self-centered. You knew how Dad felt, Mom. Of course, dear. We've been together for 38 years. I know what he's thinking without him saying a word. Besides, Jackson never took care of Dad when he was sick. I was under the impression that the Jacksons were looking after my father. However, it turns out they hardly ever visited him, not at home and barely in the hospital. When I visited my dad, he would often tell me,
"Jackson comes to see me, and you have your job to attend to, Lily. There's no need for you to go out of your way."
I took his words to heart, not realizing that it was a gentle lie meant to ease my worries. I had it all wrong about Dad. I feel awful. I want to apologize. Don't fret, Lily. Your feelings are reaching Dad in heaven. The ones who should worry are the Jacksons. Who these days would buy a big, high-maintenance house like that? I bet they'll struggle to find a buyer. Ha ha. The truth in my mom's mischievously gleeful words became evident after a while. The Jacksons, unable to maintain the house on their own, had put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer. They continued to live in it even a year later. In the midst of all this, Olivia accidentally started a grease fire while cooking chicken, and the house quickly burned down. And since they didn't have money for fire insurance, their life is going to get even tougher. While I understand their predicament, it doesn't concern me. Apparently, the Jacksons are now camping out in the burned-down remains of their house. Living in the Highlands condominium is absolutely fantastic, and I can only feel gratitude toward my mother. I've been paying my mom rent every month, but it seems she's been saving it all to ensure we won't face hardship in the future. Every day is filled with peace and happiness as I live with my incredible mother and kind husband. As I visited my father's grave, I vowed to him that I would continue to repay my mother's kindness.